CWAC members, staff, guests. Mark, if you'll introduce, start the round of introductions.
Perfectly. To remind people, we are recording this tonight. We've got a number of people that are able to join us via a remote contact too. So I'm going to do the we'll manage introductions in the room here first and then go to folks online. So I'm going to start with you, Jody.
I'm Jody Newcomer.
Mark Jockers, I'm the Chief of Staff tonight, and I am sitting in as the CWS representative tonight because Diane is at the National Association of Clean Water Agencies Executive Committee in Louisville, Kentucky this week.
Terry Song, business representative and chair.
Glenn Fee, I'm one of the environment representatives.
Matt Wellner, I'm one of the two builder developer reps.
Mike McKillop, representing District 3.
Alan Jesse, agriculture 2.
Andy Haugen, District 4.
You can introduce yourself, George.
George Marsh, ag.
Morsel, Clean Water Services.
Are you Logan?
Logan Olds, Chief Utility Operations Officer, Clean Water Services.
Jill Erickson, Clean Water Services, Natural Systems Department. Sadie Boyers, Water Resources Specialist.
Shannon Huggins, Community Engagement Services.
King Lulu, Clean Water Services, Research and Innovation Manager. Laura Porter, Business Practice Leader, Project Delivery.
Now I'm going to go online, so I'll start with you, Alex, if you can hear us, if you could participate. Okay.
I'm just it says unmuting.
Well, you can hear us because we cannot hear you very well. So. Okay, Lane, I see you.
But it's not working. That's so
You're
weird.
still there.
Oh my gosh. I can hear you.
Okay. Okay, good. And we hear you a little bit better now. Okay, thank you.
You can hear me now?
Lane?
Oh, there
Yep, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Sorry about that. It was working earlier, but Alex Fan, District 1. Sorry for all the tech all the time.
Now, hi, Lane. So Elaine, hopefully you can hear us. You're a little choppy, but that's fine as long as you can hear us. So.
Here we go. Is this better or am I echoing?
That's better. That's good.
Okay, excellent. Elaine Stewart, Environment.
Thank you. Joe?
Good evening, everyone. This is Joe Gall, Chief Utility Relations Officer for Clean Water Services.
Thank you very much. So, it's dinner, so go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mark Para, Builder Developer Representative.
Thank you, Mark.
Stephanie, do we have any members of the public?
No, Joe.
Okay, next up, we will acknowledge that the commission has reviewed and accepts the summary of the June 14th, 2023 meeting. On to our climate action roadmap. Thank you, Joe.
I'll start, and I also have some people to talk about.
The commission's action on this is informational.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm very honored to present with my colleagues together about the climate action roadmap. So the background of the climate action roadmap is on May 16th. The board was trying to see as a for providing performance metrics. It's really great to hear all of our and I'm looking forward to hearing all of the work out and comments on this. So because the roadmap is a very complex kind of an initiative, a lot of initiatives. So for this meeting, we're going to present the overview of the climate action roadmap. Then really hearing from all of you, there's any gaps or interests related to specific initiatives. And then this is going to inform development of a performance metric. We also engage that this might take more than one meeting because there is very complex initiatives with a multi-phases approach as well. So the presentation overview include just setting some of the foundation, and then everyone have seen this climate change. And then we'll introduce a climate action roadmap and what are the goals for climate action, followed by some of the climate action initiative highlights that my colleagues going to co-present together. And then we'll talk about the next steps from there. All right, so regional climate change. We all have seen this coming, and especially for the last few years, I think it's more we're seeing extreme events with the prolonged drought, with the reduced summer water supply. A lot of this is because of a warmer temperature and the precipitation pattern change as well. And this leads to a lot of seasonal change with the irrigation seasons as well as the water demand change. I think just referencing a few years ago in 2020, that's when I remember there is a hazardous air quality because of the wildfire. Then actually Clean Water Services all closed, and now we have turned into minimum staffing because of the hazard and safety for the staff. Also in 2021, we have this record high over 100 Fahrenheit for several consecutive days that leads to the limitation of the outdoor work for water services. And then just about a couple of weeks ago, I think we all see this over 90s for several days. So it has become more extreme and it become more frequent what we have seen. And then the other part is on this, especially around the wet weather season, it's the changing rainfall patterns with the extreme precipitation. But overall, the precipitation is about the same, but it's really more the extreme precipitation with localized flooding. And you can see this, one of the examples we see here in Washington County. Then we also see this even during the April and the March, May, there is still storm and flooding, which is not always the case. Talk about extreme heat, which leads to the wildfires. And then that leads to the increased air pollution as well. So this become much more and more is a regional issue, and for Clean Water Services, that's where we have developed this strategic plan to adapt to climate change. So there are the four purposes for climate action roadmap. The first one is to enhance collaboration and actions to align with the Clean Water Services strategic goals and objectives. Part of this is that luckily a lot of the different departments within Clean Water Services already doing a lot of project initiatives focusing, and is with the benefit of the climate change. But what we want to do is enhance more cross departmental collaboration and alignment at organizational level. And the second is to enable initiatives to be implemented more efficiently and effectively. A lot of times staff have great ideas and saying this is what we want to do, but the resource or fundings are not available. So having this on one roadmap altogether will provide that efficiency and support for departments. And that's going to support strategic planning and decision making for a lot of our work. And also just making sure Clean Water Services are prepared to adapt to climate change. So I'm really pleased to see that Climate Action Roadmap is our first district-wide cross-cutting strategic roadmap that covers every department, every program, started at the highest level, at the strategic level. Where this the really unique and special is alignment with the financial planning, making sure we have the funding availability, human resource, have the capital, have the human resource available as well as part of the capital planning overall. And then the other part is making sure all of these initiatives being implemented and there is accountability to this as well. So we are implementing this project management portfolio system, which Laura Porter here is the overall managing the program portfolio here. So we are going to do project sequencing, project tracking, as well the reporting and the updating and to share with the feedback as well. So that's the project portfolio system part. The third element of this roadmap is all of these are at the strategic level. At the end of the day, someone needs to be on level. So this is where the departments and the programs initiatives is going to be in alignment from the strategic roadmap to program roadmap and that ultimately get implemented on the ground. And feel free to ask any questions about any of this as well. So. There are 5 goals under the climate action roadmap, and it's also laid out on the hard copy as well. So the first one is to embed climate adaptation into strategic planning, and this is going to be throughout all the programs to provide cost-effectiveness services and alignment with our organizational excellence as a part of a Clean Water Services key strategic outcomes. The second goal for climate action roadmap is to provide that climate conscious programs in the provision of wastewater and stormwater management services. And it's really to integrating green, which is the treatment plant and pump stations, green infrastructure like the water quality facilities and the nature-based solutions that you will hear a lot of the street restoration solutions to integrating as a holistic solution to support regulatory compliance and the watershed health. And you can see the connection with our key strategic outcome. This connected to integrated water resource management and resilient watershed. The third one is advanced research, innovation, and resource recovery to incorporate low energy, low carbon, and climate resilient solutions. You all know that the research and innovation, resource recovery is a part of the Clean Water Services culture. And this is in alignment with our key strategic outcomes of research, innovation, and resource recovery. Next is the add value through community partnerships that build our region's adaptive capacity to respond to climate change, because we are all experiencing this together. And just with the CWAC and all the other partnerships, we want to make sure that we are connected with the partnership and catalyzing transformative partnerships. Last but not least, climate adaptation in a way is really risk management, because there are so many uncertainties and it needs to take a risk-based approach to develop risk management strategies to mitigate risk, loss of value of investments in water services investment, workforce safety as well. And this is in alignment with the natural hazard mitigation plan that Clean Water Services has been working with the Washington partners as well, and also through insurance to make sure we have that risk mitigation approach as well. And this is connected to contributing to the region's environmental and economic vitality. And just to get a little bit more overview of the impact of the climate change, and then with all these challenges, it really touches on every part of the Clean Water Services. You can see with the weather pattern changes, that's going to impact our nature-based solutions, how the plant's survival and growing during this changing climate. And obviously with this extreme precipitation, flooding issues, there is a stormwater management we need to consider being part of the impact. And then Clean Water Services, as you all know, have this stringent regulatory compliance. So a lot of this is flow-based and temperature-based. So there is a big impact for our regulatory compliance. Then with all this impact and change, our master planning, CIP, and construction needs to take a lens from a climate adaptation and mitigation. And then resource recovery, energy optimization that Logan's going to talk about it is really showing you that adaptation and mitigation are part together and how Clean Water Services is being a leader to mitigate the climate change. Again, the climate change and the connection related to risk management and the natural hazard mitigation plan is impacted as well. So with the roadmap, so there are 16 objectives, and then you can see there is on the table on the second page. And then each objectives have multiple initiatives, and that across three phases, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So there has been quite a process for us capturing all the initiatives, and it's not the project level yet. This is still high level initiatives. What we need to consider in the planning for the next decades, I would see, is definitely a journey. It's impossible really to talk about all the initiatives, so we are going to highlight 1 or 2 examples under each objectives, and hopefully you will see the depth of and the breadth of the roadmap here. So the first initiative is related to climate science and scenario planning. As you all know, Clean Water Services take a scientific-based approach to a lot of the decision makings. As far as the climate change, this is heavily based on the science. How is the climate change is going to impact and what is the future change? So the last model is from the United Nations, the climate global model. So basically, it's based on the historical observation, and they developed this global climate models. So you don't need to get into all the details of the 5 or 3, but basically these are 5 scenarios. So the bottom scenario is the best scenario. That's going to show you by 2100. So the temperature is going to be 1.5 degrees C, which is equivalent to 2.7 Fahrenheit. So that's a bad scenario. We do everything, we do mitigation and all that great stuff. That's a bad scenario. And then the worst scenario is the top scenario here is the 8.5. That's going to lead us to 1.8 degrees C, which is 9 Fahrenheit, 9 degrees. That's a big change. And this is a global level. Obviously, this doesn't immediately translate to the regional change, but give you a range of how climate change is going to happen. And then where we are looking to is a downscale this model from a global grid, getting to the Oregon and this region and looking to the temperature scenarios too. So we're in the process of looking to the best model, both being practical and programmatic. We don't want to spend all the funding just to get to that accurate model from an academic perspective, but it needs to be really making sense from a practical application standpoint. On the other side is I thought it's really interesting to see this cutting edge, the artificial intelligence model that we have an in-house data scientist has performed. So she has looked into using machine learning model to predict the Tualatin River temperature. So the model is a very good representation. The x-axis is the true values. That's what the temperature in Tualatin River, and then the y-axis is the predictions. So you can see ideally you want to see that exactly the same, but it's along that line. So that shows we can using some of the tools to predict our river temperature.
Elaine has a question.
Oh, yeah.
Elaine, you have a question? Your
Yeah,
hand
thank
is
you.
up.
I just wanted to, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yes.
Hello?
Yep.
Yes, I hear you.
Okay. Oh, good. Thank you. I just wanted to check in since you were showing the global models. there are people at or localized organizations that are already doing a lot of this counseling work. I just want to check in and see if you've been working with them.
Yes, thanks, Elaine, for the question. We are working with, there's the University of Washington, there's other regional partners, City of Portland. We are actively discussing with them and to leverage a lot of the existing work and modeling. Hopefully that answers your question. All right, I'll keep going. Thank you. So this is again, we're using different ways to look into the temperature. The reason the river temperature prediction is important because our permit compliance is directly linked to the river temperature. So knowing this will give us more proactively process control and think about how to mitigate that risk. And also, as you all probably know, we are doing this summer water release, and this is going to help us to getting more of a proactively knowing how much water we need to release. With that, I'm going to turn over to my colleague Jill and her team to talk about nature-based solutions.
Elaine kind of queued me up. Thank you so much. Good evening. Good to see you all again. I'm Jill. I'll be presenting this evening with my colleague, Sadie. So just as we were talking about, as long as the plants and our projects are functioning and providing shade, then Clean Water Services remains in compliance. So in natural systems, we want to proactively understand and mitigate some of these expected changes, these impacts to our trees and projects, and thousands of enhancement projects that we're managing. For a little bit of perspective, the Stewardship Division in the Natural Systems Department distributes more than 1 million plants to projects all over the district every year. We've been doing this for the past 8 years. So Clean Water Services and our partners source these plants locally. We are in currently EPA Zone 3. And so we know sourcing these plants locally is going to make sure that these plants survive. They're the most appropriate plants to put out on the projects. So the study that is part of this climate roadmap started back in 2019. It is a partnership with the Soil and Water Conservation District and also the Institute for Applied Ecology. In order to develop the baseline for our study, we were working with a tool from the U.S. Forest Service. This gave us a glimpse of our very likely future, and it doesn't look good. In 2051, there will be no suitable sources in the Willamette Valley. So how do we mitigate that? The model helped us find future climate analog regions or seed regions that are very similar to the expected future conditions and also suitable for seed collection. We contracted Stillwater Science to use our current monitoring protocols, and they surveyed trees, shrubs, and understory species in these future climate analog regions. And we compared those plants that they saw there to those that we have here in the Tualatin Basin. From those surveys, we then developed a list of plants of interest. Winnowed that big list down to 24. And this was a ranking. This was based on things like relative cover and frequency, plant community, plants versus upland plants, risk, the value to clean water, the likelihood of establishment. And so now, in this next phase of this project, we are collecting and testing seed from those areas that match our future climate projections. Sadie's going to talk about that.
All right. Thank you, Jill. My name is Sadie Boyers. I am a water resources specialist in the Stewardship Division, and I use she, her, and they, them pronouns. I care for and distribute plants to Clean Water Services projects and will be in charge of growing out the climate adaptive plants at the Tualatin River Farm. So seed collectors are out in the field right now. The Institute for Applied Ecology are collecting seed here in the Tualatin Valley, and then in our 3 climate analog regions. One is the Umpqua, which you can see in the middle photo on this slide, the Shasta region as well in Northern California, and then the Humboldt region here on the left on the west coast of Northern California. So clean seed is arriving now. I just got an email yesterday that the salmonberry seed is clean and ready to be picked up and stored at the Portland State Seed Bank. So I'll be getting that next week. And like Jill said, of all of the plants that were surveyed, 24 tree and shrub species were selected for seed collection and grow out. 20 of those 24 plants are found in the Tualatin Basin. They're plants we work with very intimately already. The Oregon white oak comes to mind, the tall Oregon grape comes to mind, our snowberry comes to mind, and then there are 4 of the 24 plants that are not found here, but are plants of interest that should do well in our new climate. Those are the California black oak, the California bay laurel, the black fruit dogwood, and the incense cedar. So the grow out process will take place at the Tualatin River Farm over the next 3 to 4 years. And once established, individual plants will be randomly selected for a common garden experiment. These plants will be planted out in the field and monitored in upland, riparian, and wetland settings across the Tualatin Basin. This project will help us to determine the effectiveness of the modeling tools that we used and the potentially appropriate ratios of plants to add to the landscape as the climate changes. We will not be replacing all of our plants with these climate adaptive plants. Instead, we want to use this information to further support our local plant populations, to potentially add in a percentage of these plants that are successful from the climate regions, and to not spend extra time and money on plants that we find do not grow here well at all. So some of those details we'll see pretty quickly. Did the plant survive after we planted it? Is it growing? Those kind of things we'll know right away. Other things like, is it leafing out and flowering at the same time as our local plants and at the same time as all the pollinators that rely on those plants? Is it actually capable of reproducing? Can it set seed? Can it bear fruit? Those kind of things we won't know for potentially upwards of 20 years, depending on the plant. So these will be these really cool living laboratories that we'll be able to visit in the future. Clean Water Services folks will be able to visit, the community will be able to visit, and our partners will be able to explore other issues that come up with climate change as they arrive in the future. And so the Climate Adaptive Plant Management Project is really important and an important investment in the resiliency of our plant communities and our green infrastructure.
Thank you. And then we would invite our colleague below to talk about the resource recovery side of the
Yes.
Good evening. Chief Utility Operations Officer. And it's interesting, right? So we just talked about the plant pellet and the importance of transitioning the botanical species within the watershed. What's also interesting, of course, is that there is a gray infrastructure side to what we do, and it also has a pretty significant impact. Traditionally, it's not often thought of as related to climate change. But when you think about it, co-digestion, which is essentially taking digested waste and producing methane from it, is in effect a way to reduce our impact on climate change. So one of the projects we're looking at is moving away from, we have a number of flares at our facility. So what we do is we convert that organic waste to methane. We then burn it. Some of it is used at Durham to buy power, up to 60% of the power. Some of it is excess flared. So a better way to reuse that resource is to convert that methane, because methane is methane is methane. whether it comes from a fossil fuel source or whether it comes from renewable carbon, it's still methane. So what we can do is take the methane that we produce in our anaerobic digesters, convert it into renewable natural gas, which has the same chemical formula as natural gas, put it into a pipeline, and then reduce our carbon emissions as a result of that. Because we're taking what was once an emission, we're now cleaning it up, compressing it, sticking it into a pipeline, and then people that use it to fuel natural gas vehicles and fuel those natural gas vehicles with renewable natural gas. People that use natural gas to heat their homes, cook food, do those types of activities, can now use renewable natural gas as part of that process. So what you're seeing in front of you on the left is one of our cogeneration engines at Durham that uses not only the gas produced from indigenous solids sent to our facilities, but also gas produced from fats, oils, and grease. So when you go to a restaurant or something like that, those facilities have grease traps as part of their operation where they store that grease. Because if it goes into the collection system, it can congeal, create clogs, and create problems. Instead, it's collected there, it's transported by a truck, it's placed directly into our digesters where it produces a fantastic amount of renewable natural gas. That's what we choose to convert it to. So at Durham, on the left, we are converting our co-digestion process, indigenous solids plus fog, to produce methane, which is producing about 60% of the power on site from renewable resources, right, rather than from fossil fuels. What you're looking at on the right is a project that's not yet built, but we may have something similar to that. So at Rock Creek, we're beginning the pilot process to take high-strength waste, which our focus here, the type of high-strength waste, is pre- and post-consumer food waste. So one of the best examples I've experienced are those little ketchup and mustard packages that you see, you know, they give them to you for your French fries or whatever. Those actually have expiration dates. And there are companies that go out, collect those little packages, depackage the ketchup and mustard. And I was able to take that ketchup and mustard and inject it into the digester and produce a lot of methane. That sugar, the biology that's there produces a lot of methane. So what we're starting to do at Rock Creek is create a process by which we can increase the amount of biogas that's produced, because one of the interesting facts of what we do, and as part of the reason why we're moving forward with the West Basin Master Plan, is to understand what infrastructure we need for the future, what capacity is there. So because our infrastructure is expensive, we don't want to build for today, we want to build for the future, which usually means that there is excess capacity that's built. So we may buy a school bus that'll hold 40 people, but initially it will only hold 10. And over the next 10, 15 years, it'll be full. And then we buy another school bus. But in the interim, what we can do is actually monetize that underutilized capacity. So this is where we work with partner industries that have pre- and post-consumer food waste. We monetize that underutilized capacity. So while it's sitting there, what we can actually do is sell that capacity in effect for that period of time until the indigenous solids reach the point where it offsets that use through the use of tipping fees, which is one way, and again, the additional production of biogas. So we're moving forward with the high-strength waste program at Rock Creek. Again, we want to achieve and work towards net zero, which leads to another interesting opportunity. How many of you have seen where you can offset the emissions associated with your plane flight as part of your thing, right? Wouldn't it be great if you could offset the emissions associated with flushing your toilet? So you've toured our facilities, hopefully. You've seen they're very energy intensive, right? There's a lot of concrete, steel, there's a lot of energy that goes into that. So I think it would be a pretty neat business model if we could actually create some non-rate revenue that monetize that. And if our ratepayers actually wanted to offset the carbon emissions associated with processing their waste and thereby provide a benefit to our other members through various projects that sequester carbon, there's another kind of interesting concept that we're pursuing within our division. So there's a number of opportunities that are out there if we're creative enough to pursue them. And yeah, it's kind of fun. It's pretty neat. So, any question? Yes, sir.
When you either burn it in the digester or whatever else, somehow when you burn it, you're still getting off CO2 and other stuff.
Correct.
But the difference is this is, what you're getting something out of it that it normally would just go to waste.
Yes. Mark will probably want to smack me, but I will keep it as simple as that. I will, yes, that's essentially what's going on.
So what the benefit is you're taking, without doing this methane from the treatment plant just gets burned off. And you go somewhere and drill a well and come up with more methane to run your car.
That's right.
So now we're taking the methane out that used to just go to waste. And we're using it to run the car, and we're not having to get more methane out of the ground.
Correct. That's why it's considered renewable, because it comes from anthropogenic carbon sources, right? Versus a fossil fuel carbon source. So it's renewable because it's produced from the waste that we produce just as part of food, you know, our activities. We eat food, we process it, it goes into the toilet, it comes to the treatment plant, which is, again, methane is 22 or 23 times more destructive to the ozone layer than CO2. So we don't want to release methane into CO2 because that's the lesser of the two evils. But it's even better if we can take that biogas, that's what we call it, in its raw form. We can clean it up, remove all of that CO2, process that separately, and then be able to inject pressurized, cleaned, higher purity methane into the natural gas pipeline. So that's what we're currently evaluating at our Rock Creek facility. One of the key elements of this, though, is because we have underutilized capacity, we want to maximize the amount of biogas production by working with industry. So this is where Mark needs to give me the hook, because I can just keep talking about this. But here's the fun part. In our industry, traditionally, we think of what comes to us has to come through a pipe. It absolutely does not, right? So we have a solids train, we have a liquids train. What we can actually do with the underutilized capacity in the solids train, we don't want those solids going into the line because we have to spend more money and effort to separate them, plus they degrade before they get to us. So industries that are out there are having to install expensive pretreatment technologies. There's also the option to consider, depending upon the ROI for the specific industry, to say, you know what, I wonder if we just haul this waste rather than spending money on polymer, on equipment, on all of the design, the maintenance to do this. What if we just haul that waste directly to the treatment works and inject it into the digester and bypass all of that stuff, thereby reducing the cost for the industry, giving them another option to consider. This also helps our member cities with the economic development, because as they try and attract businesses and industries, they now have another tool in their toolbox that may help them compete against other communities elsewhere. So there's a number of different benefits that you can think of if we just think a little more broadly about the opportunity and how we choose to allocate the capacity of our infrastructure. Sorry, that's like a whole lot, but
Not enough, really.
fun.
So what kind of industries are you talking about?
Pre and post consumer food waste currently. We actually hit a milestone a couple months ago on the Durham project. We're now over $1 million annually in revenue and tipping fees, and that doesn't even include the gas production associated with that.
That's the fats, oil, and grease kind of stuff?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Logan, can you maybe, have we got a question here? So what we got? Nisha, I see your hands up.
Hi. Sorry, I have kids on my lap, so hopefully this doesn't get interrupted. But I guess I had two questions. One is, how does this plan not incentivize the continuation of waste streams that could otherwise be, you know, dealt with in more sustainable ways? If there's now like some kind of profit margin associated with waste streams, then how are people incentivized to cut their waste? And then two, how does Clean Water Services ensure that this product goes to the most hard to electrify industries so that we're not just burning more things that create CO2 when, you know, those industries could be electrifying?
Okay, very good questions. I love your questions. On the first one, currently what many of these waste haulers do is the waste that we could take and inject in our digesters that would be completely contained and processed is dumped in a landfill, or it's dumped as feedlot, as food, where it off-gases directly to the atmosphere. So all of that methane that's associated with the biodegradation of that carbon is vented directly to the atmosphere. So our ability to capture that waste and process it is actually a much higher end goal and much more sustainable because we are limiting the emissions associated from that waste. I'm sure you run across various articles associated with methane emissions from landfills. So what this allows us to do is reduce the emissions from landfills by capturing that carbon, being able to process it sustainably and inject it. Related to your second question about electrification, just depends on what you read and where. But when we consider the environmental impact associated with lithium production and the extreme mining that occurs, when we look at the amount of copper that's going to be required, all of the NIMBY issues associated with building power lines, tripling and quadrupling the amount of that our electrical grid system to be able to handle all of that new power demand to electrify the industries. What I would posit is that we actually need to think more broadly and understand that there's a mixture of fuel, that we can't simply rely on one single silver bullet. And I think that's the fallacy associated with fossil fuels. For so long, our society has solely relied on fossil fuels as a source to provide that cheap long-term energy. Now we have to think more broadly and understand that there are a number of potential energy sources, and what we should be doing is maximizing each one. So electrification certainly has its place. Renewable natural gas absolutely has its place. Solar has its place to produce electrical power. We need to think more broadly, and what we need to do again is understand that the days of what I would call less expensive energy are coming to an end, and we have to be more creative, and most important, we have to be more sustainable about how we consume and use energy. So hopefully that addresses your question.
Other questions for Logan?
I think one of your main challenges is getting all of what you said in the last 20 minutes down to like 8 words on a bumper sticker. I mean, it all makes perfect sense, but getting somebody to sit down long enough to understand, what are you guys doing? What are you wasting money on doing all this stuff, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, to me, it's kind of the right thing to do, and it makes a lot of sense, but like I said, you got to get that onto a bumper sticker or a slogan or something somehow or another.
But there's still an ROI that's involved for these projects, right? You still have to meet certain metrics, and I have always used 7 years in the public sector as the dividing line, which is longer than some, shorter than others. But I typically find that that's a pretty good baseline. So when I look at these types of projects, I'm looking for a business case that will lead to a 7-year or right around 7-year ROI. Some of the equipment, its lifespan is right around 10 to 12, maybe as much as 15 years. So using a 7-year ROI gives you enough time to incorporate unforeseen maintenance issues, unforeseen operations issues, especially when you're dealing with RNG because the pressures can be up around 3,000 PSI. But this is also where you balance risk. So public-private partnerships to help take on financial risk associated with these types of projects. There's a number of grant opportunities that are out there as well. So it's really developing a business concept that goes from multiple. And if any of you are familiar with the stone soup analogy, it was one of my favorite childhood books. This is really kind of the way I think about these types of opportunities is how can we each bring something to the table that creates something that's better than what we could do as individually, whether it's an individual utility like ourselves or one of our partners. And I think we've shown as Clean Water Services, any number of occasions, our willingness to partner to create something that's better for Washington County than we can do on our own. And I see this in the same vein and in the same opportunity.
And I want to just add on to that, the bumper sticker. So as think about all the initiatives, we are also developing a communication strategy, both within internally as well as externally with the targeted audience. So that's a great question. And maybe that's part of the measures. How do we measure the success and the communication of it?
Good. Oh, go ahead, Terry. Oh, this is, Nisha, do you have a follow-up? You have your hand up?
Sorry, no, that's just a delay with the kids. I don't know how to put it down actually from the app.
When do you think these types of energy will be like as cheap or kind of balance out with like fossil fuel energies, right? Because I'm assuming right now they're more expensive. Do you think it's something that they will get cheap over time, or do you think it's going to stay at high cost?
It really depends on the market and how different states approach this. Washington, of course, have access to hydropower, which makes it difficult to compare against fossil fuels directly, right? One of the projects that I built, renewable natural gas, was worth 4 times the value of natural gas. So it often depends on the specific economic incentives. We recently won a key battle that we've been fighting on for 15 years with the EPA related to co-digestion and the ability to get the highest level of environmental credits, D3 RINs, renewable identification numbers, which shows that what we're talking about has a significant and well-documented environmental benefit. So we're very excited about that, but it does help improve the economics. These projects are difficult, right? You have to be passionate about them, you have to see the vision, and you have to be willing to go through the complexities in order to enable them. And because there is a number of pitfalls that are associated with this, and there aren't that many utilities that are able to manage those successfully. So I always like to look at every opportunity that you evaluate as when's your walk away point, right? Because every deal you have to be willing to walk away from if it's not going to make good sense, whether that's on direct economics or value added, or however you choose to define the overall value of that project.
What are some of those pitfalls? Like with
Sir, I would suggest we spend a whole separate discussion on that, or I'm actually giving a presentation on that to King County, Seattle tomorrow. Talking about some of those issues, but I'd be more than happy to discuss that with you separately because, again, Mark's going to give me the. Sounds good. Thank you, though. I appreciate the question. Yes, sir.
How much of the local food waste are we capturing versus what's going to the landfill? Is it just a small percentage that you said we had $1 million in tipping fees last year?
Well, that's on the FOG, fats, oils, and grease. So that's a separate program. This is a whole new program.
Okay.
To both of them are considered high strength waste. So we focused on fats, oils, and grease. Now we're pivoting towards pre and post consumer food waste. And we're still going out and evaluating the market. Portland has a number of opportunities, but there aren't bundlers here. There aren't companies that go out and know what all of the waste sources are, create a blended product that can then be placed into digestion. In larger metro markets, there are bundlers. Ours is a smaller market, it's not there. So we are required to do some of that upfront legwork to find them. And what you look for is ones that have a high enough strength waste and produce enough volume on a weekly basis that provide that peanut butter and jelly, that consistent, maybe it's not the greatest amount of gas, but it just gets you there. So that then you could add on those peaky loads that may produce a lot of gas, but maybe you only get one or two of them a week. So we still have to build that business model. This is why it's a pilot. We're not certain whether this is ultimately going to work within our market because the timing may not be right. But when I look around and I see all of the food industries that are here, I'm really interested in talking to Fred Meyer, right? Their facility down in Sauvie Island. So we're identifying where these opportunities are and thinking about, well, how can we leverage what their issues are? How can we provide a service that also helps our ratepayers and helps us achieve our goals?
Is it possible that you guys just doing this work or us doing this work in the first place is going to attract a bundler to this market?
I've called a couple folks I know with that in mind. It would be nice.
So one thing I wanted to say here is that we have a lot of discussion, you've heard about this before maybe, is trying to look at non-rate revenue. So, and this is an example of that. I mean, the fat, oil and grease piece, that tipping fees we got there, plus I think we went from maybe less than 20% on-site energy production to probably over 60.
Over 60 now.
Because this is just like an octane booster. This nasty stuff. And some of you may have been on CWAC, the dog policy where you get to see every night after dinner lectures. Thanks to you. Lots of this very high fat content stuff we feed into. Try to find these other non-rate revenues that are really important to us.
This may not be a question for you, Logan, or it might be for somebody in the rest of the team. Obviously, this is a discussion about climate change. And it's something that, is not within one basin. The natural systems team talked about some of the work they're doing. Who's leading kind of the regional discussion around some of these issues? Because obviously it's pretty critical. Your stone soup analogy is probably applicable here. Who is leading that discussion, whether it's around natural systems, whether it's around Bureau of Environmental Services or some of your other like organizations working together on let's find what's best for our region. Is that happening? How is that happening?
I think that's a great transition statement to turn things back over to Ting.
Perfect.
And Mark, and I will sit down and let them answer.
Glad we planned that out.
Yes, thank you very much for your help.
Yeah.
Great question. Yeah, we do have a partnership initiatives that I can get to. So before that.
It's the other issue too. I mean, it's a really good question, Glenn. And I think, you work in this world, right? And so I think it's an open question. We have looked a lot at the state climate framework that they have there for some guidance, because ours is really about operational. It's about operations of this large utility that we have, and we probably have an outsized impact and opportunity to mitigate. But how is that being organized? That's a state or federal policy probably level stuff. I think we're short of a coalition of NGOs or something.
Yeah, let me jump to the partnership first because I think we are. Yeah, so like you asked about have community partnerships to integrate climate change adaptation to water resources management. There are several large initiatives related to the challenges here. The first one is wildfire. So obviously this is the part that Clean Water Services and it's the leader from the natural NSDS. Department is working with the GWC on source water protection for the wildfire protection. And this being identified as the natural hazard mitigation plan. And then they are looking to both mitigation plan as well as the post-fire recovery strategies and the responsibilities as well. And then there is this planning, repairing, planning with the members as well. That's the natural system is the leading. But then regarding a lot of this great infrastructure, that's where the local is leading. So we're taking kind of a collaborative approach. It depends on the initiatives and the ownership of the department, and we have that leaders for each initiative. And then we do have a initiative on the roadmap that how do we be more strategic working with like PBS in city of Portland and other Clackamas County and all. So we're going to form more of a formal conversations on a lot of this topic as well. Because there's so much we can learn from each other. And then I was just getting back to another example, and actually this is something we already discussed about carbon emission, reducing that carbon mitigation. And this is another research work. It's a part of the Natural Systems and Research and Innovation Department is working on. I'll go through quickly because I think we're here behind. So the left side is the carbon sequestration process. Everyone probably understand on a broader scale, it's the carbon dioxide and then from the atmosphere and then getting through the photosynthesis, taking up through the leaves, and then that's getting stored in the roots, and that's further stored into the ground by the soil microbial community for long-term carbon storage. On the other hand, the respiration from the trees and microbes do release the carbon to the air as well. So this is a very dynamic and connected system, both above the ground as well as under the ground. But the net benefit, we all know that the long term is that carbon sequestration and reduce carbon greenhouse gas emissions. The research question is, as you heard from us about the nature-based solutions, how much carbon are we actually sequestration through all this project? So the right side of those two pictures is showing a project we are working on. This is a Daybase 2 with over 100 acres of the site. This site was selected because it is used both for wetland enhancement as well as the repairing and restoration with utilizing recycling as well. So multi-benefits. And then we are currently collecting soil samples and then going through processing and analytical measurement, understanding carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus content. And we're going to sample over time to look at before and after tree planting and to see how the overall trends and see the no change is going to dioxide. And last but not least is about natural hazard mitigation plan. So this is something it's working in parallel with other colleagues and with the Washington County and other partners. So you can see the connection here with the plan and the climate roadmap is that anything climate related hazard is identified already in this NHMP plan. So we are looking to this, such as the drought, extreme heat, wildfire, storm, etc. There are already vulnerabilities of a critical asset infrastructure identified, but we want to refine these vulnerabilities, understanding what's the impact for clean water services and operations, and then understand and also looking to from a scenario-based approach and develop mitigation strategy and sequencing and mitigation. So this aligns with the number 5 goal, risk management. So those hopefully gave you a flavor and examples of all the different type of projects and initiatives we're working on. Some are well underway and others are more kind of starting thinking and what will be for the next year or so. So overall, what the climate action roadmap really shows you is through climate adaptation, that's going to lead to climate mitigation. And we're taking this as a more of a holistic approach versus kind of debating whether it's adaptation and mitigation. A lot of this is just showing that co-benefit there. And ultimately, this leads to a resilience. So this is the exciting part, the next steps. Thank you so much for all your questions. So I want to share the next steps and what perspective we want to hear from you. just a little bit first is that March this year, we got the review from the board and approved this climate action roadmap, which is what you are seeing as a hard copy. And then in May, board charges this group to review the roadmap, provide input on the performance measures. And this is where we are today with the first overview and understanding your concerns and the questions. We have been working on this even from last year and more from a more of a structured process after the approval starting in May to form a climate working members, as you see some of them already. Now we are developing the project portfolio and implementation plans here. And then we'll develop a draft measures to bring back to you in November for you to review and provide input on those measures as well.
I assume that's this year.
Yes.
It's okay.
It should say November 2023.
Yeah, it is.
We're gonna see very good content.
Very engaged, thank you. And then December, we are hoping to finalize this performance measures and then bring back to the board and then to update them on the performance measures and progress. So we're looking to this as the annual update to the board as well as the CWAC for some phase one initiatives, and that continues through the process for many years. That's the last one.
Question, Sadie's still here? So it sounds like you're introducing, trying to find new species that are more resilient to climate change for our area.
Yeah.
So what about, I guess, less desirable invasive species? Anything that you can read about?
That's a really good question.
How would it affect our operations?
Yeah, I don't actually have a good answer for that question. James was here to answer the invasive species question. He definitely is more focused on that portion of our work. I will say one of the like peskier native plants that will do well here that we chose not to bring up is poison oak. So with like the hotter, drier climate, it's gonna like growing here more. But in terms of invasives, I'm not entirely sure plant community wise. Yeah, I can look that up for you and send you some.
And plants migrate naturally, so this is an assisted migration. You know, we're trying to help some of the plants that we want to establish here, and we're trying to bring that genealogy up here. Materials. So invasives are coming here, not too long ago, telling you about more plants here. And I think the question for us is, how do we continue? So there's a lot of work on our team talking about like what is it? What did you think?
I think the hope too is that if we can underplant, like as trees are dying and we're losing shade, we can underplant with trees that are more adapted to the climate, that hopefully we won't have to deal with as many of those plants that will die and that, you know, that's that empty space. So hoping to make some like really sun-loving invasive plants to come in and scoop up those spots that like maybe losing the ash will create along the streams and rivers.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
Sure, so there's a question that Alex sent us at the end of the meeting that I'm not sure if he's positioned to ask, so I'll go ahead and share that. It says, do we have any reports showing specific climate changes to our region over the last 50 years?
So I've worked here for 30 years, so that might be a good question. We've seen changes. The easiest example that I can provide, and I think Alan can talk about this from TVID standpoint, is we have 25% stored water behind Hague Lake, and we release that water in the summer months, during the dry months, to maintain base flows of the 12th River. For the first 15 years I probably worked here, we released them on July 1st. Every year. And June 20th, and then June 15th. And on the scale, that's only a 30-year window, but we have released water as early as first week of May in the last couple of years. And increasingly, we never go to July. Usually it's typically early June, late May. And that's an example of these longer release seasons that we have. It's a really tangible example of a longer, drier summer. Now, again, that's a 30-year sample size. But that could be one example.
But that one is, you could be releasing because you're discharging more warmer water, causing you to need to release your cool water sooner than what you did 30 years ago, because your flows, your discharges were way down. And the temperature from that discharge was way down. I mean, it gets to be really complicated.
It does, although I will say so I always think about our number at Farmington Bridge, because I drive over Farmington Bridge. It's the Philip Harris Bridge, actually, every day. And I always try to guess what the flow is. Like, I'm opposite. Look, I can see. In the summer, we have a target of about 180 CFS. I think our limit is 150, but our target has been 180. And it's been 180 for at least 20 years. So that has been our target. And actually, the TMDL is, the temperature TMDL is, this is where we need Bob. Somebody else would tell me, but I think the temperature TMDL is only about 20. Because it was back in the day, Mike, you probably remember this, is that release was more on a dilution basis. It was like enough water in the river for us to discharge. Now it's really, really tight in the temperature, which is awesome. Okay, other questions? Okay, so we have to bring up our next presentation, and King and I are going to tell you, we talked a little bit about our Vientiane Lao partnership that the Clean Water Services has been involved with through something called the U.S. Water Partnership. We talked to the commission about it last June. And since that time, we've had the great fortune and privilege to be able to go to Singapore in June. I want to tell you a little bit about that work, why we're doing the work, how that works out, and also we're going to do Lao trivia. So I drive. There we go. So we're going to talk a little bit about the background of partnerships, a little bit of our trip summary. Then we're working with something called Vientiane. I know, but it says, well, we'll get to this. VCOMs, which is the utility. See. Talk a little bit about some of the guidance that we provided them, and then kind of what the next steps are. So, Ting, go stand up. So we thought we'd wear the outfits that we wore. I guess Ting's got hers better than I do. But a number of the women that went to this all had Lao skirts made. So they go and have a measure they delivered to the hotel later. It's very cool. I just had a blue linen shirt that I thought that I'd never worn before. I wore this a lot. Thank goodness. It is really hot. I'll tell you, George and I were talking about, George has traveled in Thailand. It is really hot there. We've been to Southeast Asia. It is toasty. I mean, it wasn't, it'd be like 85 degrees, but it would be like 80%. Oh, it's just something else. For the next one.
Orleans.
Yeah, I mean, so
Orlando.
yeah, it is kind of like Orleans in the summer. So the Water Smart Engagement Program, the WISE program, is really a program that connected water utilities in select Southeast Asia. It's with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations as part of this too, with U.S. urban water utilities. It's a 5-year partnership. It really is leveraging long-term value foreign exchange programs. It's funded through the U.S. State Department, and it's managed through the U.S. Water Partnership with support from the Water Environment Federation and Global Ties U.S. like the rest of everything. There we go. So the purpose of this partnership is really to increase water security through sustainable water management solutions. And this is really, it's interesting, particularly in the country we were in, it's really about appropriate development. I mean, we're not going to allow us to talk about biological phosphorus removal and methane gas production. I mean, this is really about what we look at, sustainable development and appropriate technology. Really to establish those long-term relationships between the United States government and these Southeast Asian nations, and to increase exchange. Ultimately, there's an economic piece here too, right? To exchange services, goods, science, technology. It's interesting, when we were there, Ting, I'll talk about this a little bit, we visited a site which was a wastewater treatment plant that was, they called it the Hungary wastewater treatment plant because the Hungary was building it. They no cost loan. But the thing is then they get all their technology in there, they get their engineering in there, those pieces to start developing some of those economic relationships. So these are the utility pairings. By the way, this map is all wrong. This is not the way we flew. We flew the other way, which by the way is just about as far. So Clean Water Services, we're matched up with Laos. Miami-Dade, Florida is working with the utility in the Philippines. Water Council of Milwaukee Water Works is in Thailand. San Francisco PUC is working with Ho Chi Minh City, and DC Water is working. These are the 5 utilities that were chosen in the US to match with these 5 countries. Those of you that have flown to Southeast Asia, I mean, even we were on the plane with people from Washington DC, they flew to San Francisco and then Southeast Asia. I traveled to Europe before this. Next slide, please. So here's Vientiane. This is the capital of the Lao People's Democratic Republic. 9 cities, 1,500 square miles, about 2 million people, not quite 900,000 people. This is a big area here. So here's the trivia question. I knew how to spell Laos when I went. I knew generally it was in Southeast Asia. I really did not know a lot about this country, and I think a lot of people don't compared to the other Southeast Asia. But how many people have been to Laos? I knew how. Okay, and what were you there for?
I used to lead programs in India, and I would always stop off on my way back, drop off my college students, stop somewhere. And so it's usually Thailand, but I went to Vietnam and Laos.
So, good. Okay, there's one answer. Okay. Another question do I have? Okay. When you're in, so this is the capital, and as you look across the river, that's the Mekong River. Huge range comes out of the Himalayas, drains a huge part of Southeast Asia. I was very surprised. When you look across the river, what country are you looking at? Thailand, exactly. So I thought, really? I had no idea. Okay, now next question. What are the 5 countries that border Laos? Obviously Thailand. Yep. Come on, we'll take what else? Cambodia, yeah.
Myanmar,
Yeah.
Vietnam,
Yep.
China.
Yes, exactly. So really, it's interesting. I think of so much of Southeast Asia. I think about Vietnam, and I think about Thailand. I think about water. This is a landlocked. And it is completely landlocked, and it is incredibly mountainous. So there's these huge mountains. There is a lot of that flat floor that you fly in of all those rice paddies and stuff, but northern Laos is lots of mountains. In the last year, China's just completed a bullet train that goes to Vientiane all the way up to China. So there's a place in northern Laos that a lot of people go to hike and backpack. It used to be about an 8-hour drive. Now it's an hour and 20-minute train ride. It's just crazy. So very, very interesting. So this is the structure and governance of Laos. So president, there's the ministries, that's the central government. The local government is at a provincial level. So you've got your capital provinces and then districts. There are 18 provinces in Laos. Obviously, since the capital is in Vientiane, that's probably one of the more important. It has a lot of importance there. And this is who we work for within this capital province is the Vientiane Office of Management Service. And I'm going to try to remember all the things they did. They did water and wastewater. They also did planning, transportation, housing. They didn't really do planning. They did housing, transportation. They did driver's licenses. You go there and get your driver's license. I mean, it's a little bit of like, so we were meeting with the director of VCOMs, and so he also did driver's license and transportation, water. And of course, they don't have a lot of resources, so it's pretty challenging. We started this partnership in 2021 when we were connected with this particular delegation. We did a series of kind of virtual meetings. It's a great provided us all these tools to do this. We met with the delegation in New Orleans last year during Water Environment Federation Technical Conference. After that, they came here to Washington County. I talking to them now, so I've gotten to know them a little bit better. I think they're a little overwhelmed by Rock Creek or Durham. We took them to Fern Hill and they said, this is what we're talking about. That is more the level of technology that they are looking at. And you'll see that as we talk about our visit. And then in June of this year, we went to Singapore first, where we met that group of people together with all the other delegations, for project. And then we went out to labs. This is our trip here. We were at Singapore International Water Week Spotlight Conference in Singapore, which was kind of convened where a lot of these people were. I had the privilege to be able to serve a global CEO roundtable one day. Really interesting topics from a variety of utilities around the world. I had the director and CEO of Tokyo Water on my right, and the director of Dhaka, Bangladesh, left. But then also Chinese and no Russian, but some of the Middle East, a lot of Danish people are there. Danish people are pretty interested when it comes to water management issues. And that first day was really talking about resource recovery, energy recovery, and also a lot of stuff that Ting worked on to do with the digital twins, AI, things like that. After that, we went to Vientiane for several days and did a series of tours and then came back here. Other fun facts, 42 hours to get back from Vientiane to Portland, Oregon. It is a milk run to fly from Vientiane to Ho Chi Minh City to Phnom Penh to Seoul, Korea. That was just anyway, it was a tremendous opportunity. Go to the next slide, please. So this is us arriving in Laos. This is funny. They are very, very, very proud of their beer. Beer Laos, very, and it is everywhere. This sign is actually the beer branding, right? That is what's in the air. Tim wanted me to wear my Beer Lab T-shirt tonight. I just could not. I could not go that far. Go to the next slide, please. So this was the delegation that went. Our chair, Catherine Harrington, and I was also the chair of the Washington County Commission, was with us. Ting was Dr. Williamson, Ken Williamson. Many of you may know Ken. He was the director of research and innovation here for a long time. Long-time professor and chair of environmental, chemical, and biological engineering at OSU. A really good experience with kind of appropriate technology. Pete Munoz works for Biohabitats. He was very instrumental in the design and ultimate construction of Fern Hill itself. He has also worked on projects like this around. Fidan Karamova works with the Water Environment Federation, so that was the delegate from there that joined us. And then, like you pronounce these last two, we did get pretty good, Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Boom Kakabab. Right, close. And it was fun because it's the third time we spent time with them, so we really got to know these people well. They work in the utility industry, so it's very nice. So next slide. So with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Ting to talk about some of the.
So we'll go through each day with some of the details. So the first day, we went to the VCOM office, and then they have, the gift exchange as well as quite some of the presentations to give us an overview of what their challenges, what are some of the opportunities and the work they are working on. Then in the afternoon, we've been to the three sites. The first one is the vehicle sludge treatment plant. We'll show some of the pictures. There's a canal as well as the kind of a pond that is having some of the challenges too. So the first one is this non-high vehicle sludge treatment plant. So what the Vientiane is doing is they don't have any treatment plant in the city. So all their household is connected to a septic tank, and then the septic tank that sludge gets settled down, and that gets trapped to this vehicles treatment plant. So it's a big open site, and then the truck is collecting all the sludge on a monthly basis from each individual household, and then they get to this site. So you can see the truck gets here and deposit all the sludge, and then they have this large land that with 8 open basins where the slurry is discharged. Then there is this dosed with some of the chemicals, and then each basin is going to drink and then got dewatered from the slurry to like this solid. And then they, once they're getting to be more of an infiltration into the ground without further treatment, and then they are putting this to a different site and getting further exposure to the air and also the slow chemical decay. So that's the basic level of their treatment of the surface white sludge. So after this 3 to 4 years, each basin gets dredged and then the material is moved to a covered compost. So this is the covered compost on the right side. And then, so that's where the material is further dried and then it gets sifted to remove some of the trash as well as the other stuff, and then they back this into a soil amendment for use in food agriculture, like rubber plantations. So it's a little bit like our in water grow in a way, because it's a package that they do sell this to some of the local farmers too. And then Mark noticed there is a Facebook. Like the Facebook.
Yeah, there was, they actually had, there was a little Facebook. That you could go to. That become a QR code almost, so you can go to social media feed on this.
The basins where they stored the solids, was it aerated? Was there any type of mechanical aeration?
No, it's just a example.
Was it concrete lined or earth lined?
And we've got some good video of how they pump it out, and it comes out of these pipes, in each bay, and it just starts filling out.
And then we went to this it's called the Tongxiang Canal. So this is one of the largest distribution canals in the city. But this is a common problem for Vientiane. So you can tell from the picture, it's very polluted here. And then, so what's the coming to this is the household is called the green water. So besides all the kind of toilet water that goes to the septic tank, all the kitchen water, washing machine water is collected, and then they just discharge to the canals directly. And then the canal is also used for storm water and also for flooding weather as well. Occasionally, the septic tanks it's not really reliable, it's not properly maintained as well. So the overflow of septic tanks would discharge to the canals as well. So there is a lot of odor issues and also the pollution issues here. So this is the big challenge they mentioned to us. Want us to look for some.
Did they happen to mention anything about methanic lobanemia or blue baby syndrome? Did that come up at all?
No, but it is a public health concern, so they didn't talk about specific issues there. So, yeah, we'll talk about the part, the retention pump later. And then the second day is the pilot study side, as Mark talked about this, the Vientiane treatment plant. This is their first wastewater treatment plant that they are building. It's quite away from the city. That's why even they have this centralized wastewater plant going. But it's so expensive to build that convenient system to bring all that wastewater to the treatment plant. Like Mark said, this is the Hungarian government support the plan. So it's like quite some of the partnerships. The Hungarian government provides a technical process design and also a lot of this, but the local company have the construction and all the kind of project management level. So they gave us a presentation first, and then we went to the tour. So this is a 3D rendering of the treatment plant. It's a pretty kind of a standard secondary process. So what they have is the first is having the sedimentation, primary sedimentation, and then there is a secondary activated sludge with the chemical flocculation. There's no advanced nutrient removal that. Then they are also lacking a lot of general water quality monitoring too, so they don't know exactly, a lot of this water quality parameters as well. And then actually the monitoring is a part of a different department. It's not outside of a big house. So there is a silo approach versus here for the water services, we all do the monitoring and too. They talk about using the membrane bioreactors, which actually is a pretty good technology, but we never seen the membrane in the presentation. So there is also kind of a breakdown of a communication between the Hungarian government and laws, and it's getting translated to us too. So that's one of the challenges with this international project. And then we went to the tour for the construction site. It's quite large, so this is all where the secondary aeration is going to be. And then, we see the construction very progressive schedule. They are going to build it in a couple of years. Obviously, the pandemic and everything has impacted, but they are moving. And this is just some of the pictures. That's from people from Hungary, from the local project side, with the big delegation, and us are all there here. And then on day 3, I have visited actually the US embassy officials. So they came to the hotel, and then we talk about just giving them update, and then they are interested why we are here. It's all US government. So brief them about the water and sanitation challenges for Vientiane, the interest, and then they also provided some of the for us, because a big part of this, all of this discussion and trade funding has been funded by the State Department. In order to truly move to the next stage of a pilot project, we need funding and all this work to be happening. So that was a good discussion and exchange. And then in the afternoon, we visited the vice mayor of the Vientiane. That's where all the girls get the dress, and because the translator saying, so we want to dress kind of properly to show the respect, and then the translator recommended we have this lost skirt, so it would be great for all the girls to wash. So that's a part of the fun that we have, and he's very supportive and about the engagement and saying this face-to-face engagement has been helpful. And he also mentioned that he's going to come over to Clean Water Services later this year as well. Last year is all his staff there, so it's great to show to see that engagement, interest from the high level. And then in the evening, he also hosted a dinner for all the entire team. It's a very nice dinner. Laos is definitely a very rich culture with a lot of French influence, a lot of Southeast Asian culture as well. That's a great experience there.
It was interesting, the first night there, they took us out to dinner too. They took us to a French restaurant. And French influence is just very, the government is set up very much so, ministries, provinces, very much so French.
Yeah, and so overall, to recap the challenges for VCOM, first is because the septic tanks not properly maintained, that's their biggest challenge, and they want us to propose some of the solutions. Then which leads to the smelly and the polluted canals. And then the other part is just the lack of the centralized wastewater infrastructure and stormwater treatment right now. There is also inadequate funding. So the only reason they can build the treatment plant is because of funding from the Hungarian government. That's everything is to be cost effective. And then there's also this lack of a household payment system enforcement. They really don't have a great way to communicate, and because their economic is getting hard, so it's a lot of going on. How do we build that payment system? It's a challenge for them. So then we give them we provide the recommendation and did a presentation form. And the first one is to develop cost-effective decentralized wastewater treatment. Centralized just didn't cost so much, and without the funding, it's really hard to build that convenience network and to improve water quality and public health. Second one is to, as you can see, their weather and all that really have a lot of slack already. Sometimes it's actually causing problem, but what we are looking at is to explore nature-based solutions to help a lot of this stormwater and wastewater. The other part is the biggest identify nice cost-effective monitoring solutions to provide that water quality monitoring and understand the improvement there, as well as the stormwater treatment. Just give you an example of the recommended technologies we provided. And first is to develop this small scale biological treatment to reduce wastewater loss. So this is Dr. It's relatively low cost and it provides this removal of the secondary treatment of the TSS and the chemical oxygen demand. Then it's minimum energy requirement because it's a big treatment, just like what Logan was talking about, harvesting more energy. And it's also relatively low operation maintenance cost. And then this is also easily replicable in multiple locations. So we're proposing this, one of the suggestions, they can build a pilot to see how this works and then scale up from there. It's basically, so this is the bubbles, you can go through the wastewater goes through this and then through the anaerobic treatment and then get into the actual. And there is a lot of a reference and we also provided it's a proven technology. The second part is to getting more water quality and quantity monitoring. So within clean water services, we were facing the same challenge. A lot of these sensors is really expensive and hard to get to the scale deploying tens of 100 water quality sensors to understand pH, water flow, and also the DO concentrations. So internally, I have worked with the team about this DIY IoT approach. So putting all the sensors together, then that's been working great. This is one of our team members deploying our own sensor stations to monitor dairy creek. The overall cost is 5 times less than the cost. So we pitched this to the local government. They have a lot of industry discharge, illicit discharge as well. So they are very interested in the monitoring device as well. Last but not least is leveraging this nature-based solution. So this is where biohabitats with his expertise to utilizing one of the retention ponds we visited early on. It's called the Mars Arctic Park. There is a lot of the plantations actually blocking the waterways, causing flooding issues there. So what we are suggesting is to leave some space for the flow, for the water to flow, but still having that nature-based through proper operation maintenance to go through that treatment. So this is the where the wastewater is going through from 3 directions. And then you can see that's a brown arrow. And then there is an intended area that was the green areas that's showing the nature-based solutions. You can plant in certain species for carbon, nitrogen removal, and through circulation, your water quality going to be improved a lot. And then you can charge through the blue there. Yeah, there's additional discussion. Mark leads the discussion, and also some of this, how do we support and assist them in developing a wastewater fee structure, advise them in developing community outreach programs. So it's everything that we are doing is there's a lot of the connection that we can provide support. This is one of the night while we're going out and exploring the city, so it's very beautiful. Many temples, and it's very beautiful. So there are 3 outcomes and deliverables we see. First is really strengthen the relationships, even though we have been working with them for the last 3 years, but there's nothing beats the in-person meeting. So they came last year, and then we went there this year, really helped that relationship build. The second is having a broader and reciprocal understanding of each other, identify some of the common interests and the collaboration areas. And we did have a plan of action developed, and then we are going to further develop the recommendations to a proposal to discuss with them. And then hopefully we'll finalize the direction next steps when they come back. So next step is we are in the process of drafting a proposal for the further discussion about pilot projects. They are going to come over here before WAC this time. This is the tentative date. Then the program is going to cover one last trip for Clean Water Services delegation, return to Laos in 2024 to follow up on pilot project opportunities. But the hope is that the pilot will continue funding. With that, this is our last day. They are very kind enough to provide us a tour of several of the temples and things. So there's one of the delegates. Then there is also the tour guide to help us understand culture and the.
Questions? Do they have a good, like, what information are they able to provide you with for you to come up with solutions? Do they have a good database of as-built information or?
Great question. That's what we have been asking a lot. What about your maps? What about your the system? They don't have a good way. A lot of this, they don't have the information. Yeah.
So it was interesting on the water quality data, right? Because we didn't sure what was there, particularly when we met with the treatment plant. All of a sudden, people could give us a little bit more, not on the as-bills, but he said, oh, here's the water, and he was able to pull up the water quality data from the federal, or the federal government that was gathering this data. So we could see, oh, these are the numbers they're trying to hit. So there was some of that, but
They don't have, I mean, do they have topo information to work?
That is security reason too, what we heard, because we even want that information for us to go there.
Mhm.
Then we never get it, and then we didn't ask. Same part is security.
So you're gonna come up with, I mean, you've come up with some ideas, but you're gonna give them some ideas that they need to figure out how to implement.
Yeah, the implementation will be done. Construction. We're thinking about some of the local universities as a part of the barriers and translation. So they need to have someone locally understanding, working with us to.
we came up with 4 or 5 different options. But again, we're flying blind a little bit because they don't really have any money, but they may have some money they're willing to put in this, but is that $50,000 or is it $1 billion? So trying to get a better idea. It was interesting, very interested in all 5 of the presentations. They really wanted us to make a recommendation. They wanted to go to their boss and say, hey, look, this exchange told us to do this. They really wanted us to get much more, and not say choose from a menu. They would prefer that we just say do this. So, and it's hard to do that when we did on the budget.
Well, and they have 1,000 this that they need to do. They got a bunch of them.
Oh, absolutely.
There's obviously different problems in each of the countries that the 5 delegations went to, but are you, but water quality is a big issue, obviously, in Southeast Asia. Are you going to be speaking to the other delegates, the other colleagues of yours from domestically about sort of what they saw and working on sort of, I don't know, coming up with some joint solutions or?
I'm not sure about joint solutions. I know that we've gotten together for briefly. We will again this year in Chicago conference, and we've all gotten a little further along in terms of level of development that we're looking at. I think in Malaysia it was a lot about the water security. I don't know if that's worse that they had. The issue they had. Water is working. I don't think the issue was.
Yeah, and for Thailand, it's more like water quality monitoring. So they do have a little bit more advanced compared with the Laos, but they don't have a programmatic water quality monitoring. How do you implement the program? So they are going to send someone to the United States for 6 months or so. They have the funding, Vietnam, not the Thailand. So they are going to do that. The Vietnam utility hope is they want to provide that more of a regional kind of a guidance to other Southeast Asians too, which is really a great idea. So they all have a little bit different focus, whether drinking wastewater and yeah.
In the picture where you had the lake, the pond there, and all those houses and buildings around there. And then I thought you said way back at the start that there's 1 million and close to 1 million people live in that area and all the houses are on septics. So in that picture of the lake, does that mean that all those buildings there are on some kind of septic?
Yeah.
Whoa.
So it's apparently it's all French. Was kind of the technology that was.
I didn't see any place that wasn't building. I mean, septic is under the basement or?
It's just a tank.
It's just a tank. It is just a tank, you know.
I think the leach field is probably going to those canals,
Probably.
right?
Well, the canals was the gray, I mean, the gray one was literally plumbed.
Yeah.
So you see over here on the left.
So that's our septic tank, the picture on the top left. So that's kind of a conceptual drawing of the septic tanks. And then there's kind of a toilet, water, and then liquid water. You can see on the bottom one, so the red box, where the treatment plant is, and all the blue lines are where the city is. They are going to take 10% of the green water in the septic tanks, but 90% of this still, it's a problem. How do we solve that problem? So that's where we are focusing on decentralized, on-site, community-based solutions.
So we're trying to capture the methane from what we used to just off gas. We're going to capture some and reuse it compared to how much is just being off gas right there in that one little area. It just kind of points out the entire scale of this problem.
Yes, the scale of the problem also scale development.
Would we be better off not worrying about our off gassing and helping these people? Would that be a better global positive impact?
It's always the international development challenge, right, with US government, you know, it's, do we benefit more by helping other countries versus doing things here? You know?
Yeah, that's a whole different question with the feds and.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
What's your source of drinking water over there? Do they have wells or do they have any, and how polluted is that?
It's, I mean, it's a bigger river, so it's relatively better, but we were never to drink directly the tap water, so we have to always have the bottled water there. So, yeah.
Maybe that's why bears.
Right.
Sting drank a lot of beer.
You're fine.
So. Okay, final trivia question. Laos is one of 5 communist countries. 5. Or 5, so what do you think the other 4 are?
Venezuela, Cuba,
Cuba, what else?
Venezuela,
No,
still not.
North Korea, good, thank you. So North Korea, Cuba,
China.
Laos, China. Miss. The most repressive.
Oh, Russia.
No. Because that's considered a socialist republic, I think. North Korea.
Where?
You hardly even think about North Korea, but it was interesting.
That was one of the 4.
That was one of the, yeah, North Korea, Cuba, Laos, Vietnam, and China. It's interesting to see the level of development. Yeah, Vietnam's, let's see, the level of development in some of those, certainly in Vietnam, Laos.
Yeah.
Good. So thank you.
Interesting. Thank you. Yeah.
Still no members of the public? Okay, let's give it 2 announcements then.
Okay. A couple of announcements and one task. So last month we talked about the West Basin Master Plan. We talked about it pretty extensively. I think you brought, the commission brought a lot of issues to light, I think, for our technical team. How to look at both the gray infrastructure, but also the green infrastructure associated with the sanitary sewer side of this work. And what it's Logan's team that's doing a lot of this work, is we would like to put together a 3-member subcommittee of CWAC. So probably a pretty limited amount of time. We'll scope out exactly what that looks like to help provide some input to our technical team. In particular, I think what we're looking for is 1 builder developer rep, one of the 2 of you, and 1 environmental rep, yourself or Elaine rather, and then 1. What we'll do is we will scope what that looks like. Here's what we're asking you to do. This how many times we're probably gonna meet. This is the type of input we'll want. And we'll get that out to the commission probably in the next couple of weeks. The idea that if you're interested in that, either talk to us more about it or go ahead and nominate yourself for it.
I nominate Mark Farah.
Oh, well, I'm glad that Brian, is there a second? No, I'm sorry. You guys, you can wrestle over that. And then the other piece I want to say is our next meeting is going to be a barbecue and a canoe trip on the 12th River with our board of directors. So it's, we did try to do this every 2 or 3 years. It's get together with the board. Social opportunity, but also to learn a little bit about the river. We'll be working with 12 river keepers who will help us on some of those pieces too. And that is going to be on a Thursday, the 14th of September, and we'll get that information to you certainly. And that's all I have.
Okay, well, great. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening and thanks for coming. What about